Welcome back to Easy English, Relaxed English Conversations. I am Lily.
And I am James.
So, think about the last time you walked into a room and, completely forgot why you even went in there in the first place.
Oh, yeah, that happens to me way too often, honestly.
Right. Or, maybe you read this brilliant article, but by the next morning, you can barely recall a single detail to actually share with your friends.
Yeah, and we usually just laugh those moments off, don't we?
Yeah.
We just blame it on having a bad memory.
Exactly. We treat it like it's this unchangeable fact of life. But what if your memory isn't a fixed trait at all?
Oh, I like where this is going.
What if it's, a highly dynamic capability that you are actively damaging or actively repairing every single 24 hours?
That is a fascinating way to look at it.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into some incredibly powerful Harvard research. It maps out a complete system to basically transform your memory from a state of heavy mental fatigue right into sharp, reliable cognitive excellence.
And we're also making sure this specific conversation serves a dual purpose today.
Yes, definitely.
Because this topic is absolutely perfect for our intermediate English learners tuning in, specifically those of you aiming for that ESL B1 level.
Yep, the vocabulary we're using today to discuss, optimizing your brain, it's highly practical for describing your own daily life.
Exactly. Your habits, your routines, all of that.
You are going to hear phrases that you can use at work, at school, and just, in everyday conversation.
Because of that,
Wow.
I really want to challenge you to pay close attention today. Stay with us until the very end, because there will be a comprehension quiz to test if you fully understood the science and the vocabulary from this conversation.
Oh, yes, you definitely want to stick around for that.
So keep your ears open and focus on the context of the words right through to the end.
Okay, so we are completely throwing out the idea that cognitive aptitude, your raw brain power, is just an inheritance you're stuck with.
Right. It's not just genetics.
No, not at all. Instead, we're looking at a system of 8 specific habits. And to make this incredibly practical for you to follow, we are structuring the strategies as a natural 24-hour cycle.
I love that framing. It makes so much sense.
Right. So we're going to start by building the physical hardware overnight, then move into how you fuel and focus your brain during the workday, and conclude with how you actually lock in that information in the evening.
Starting with the foundation makes the most biological sense, really, because before anyone can actively train their memory with study techniques or puzzles, the physical hardware of the brain has to be prepped.
And that cycle begins in the dark, right, with sleep.
Exactly. The research identifies a really vital span of 7 to 9 hours of rest as the ultimate, quote-unquote, save cycle for the human brain.
The mechanics of that save cycle are what really stood out to me in the research. I mean, it is not just about resting your tired muscle.
Yeah, it's highly active up there.
Yeah, your brain is actually performing this highly complex filing operation. The Harvard data points specifically to the initial 90 minutes of sleep.
Right, that first hour and a half is critical.
During that time, a region of your brain called the hippocampus, which handles learning and memory, begins aggressively processing and saving the data you accumulated throughout your waking hours.
The hippocampus is essentially like replaying the day's experiences and transferring them from short-term holding cells into long-term storage within the neocortex.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. But to ensure that highly delicate neurological transfer happens smoothly, the most crucial actionable step is implementing a strict digital blackout 60 minutes before you intend to sleep.
A digital blackout, which means absolutely no phones, no tablets, no laptops.
None of it.
Think about your brain's sleep cycle, like hitting save as on a crucial, highly important document on your computer.
Oh, that's a great way to picture it.
Yeah, your brain needs time to finalize that process. If you skip the digital blackout and just stare at the blue light of your phone right up until the second you close your eyes, it is exactly like unplugging your computer from the wall while the progress bar is only halfway done.
You're just totally interrupting it.
Exactly. You are going to corrupt the data.
And, the biology behind that corruption is really fascinating. Blue light from screens actively suppresses melatonin.
And that's the sleep hormone, right?
Right, it's the hormone that signals to your brain that it is night. So when
Okay.
you stare at a screen, you are artificially tricking your pineal gland into believing the sun is still high in the sky.
Oh, wow. So your brain thinks it's still daytime.
Exactly. So when you finally close your eyes, the hippocampus is completely unprepared to initiate that 90-minute data sorting phase. It is scrambling to catch up, and significant portions of your daily learning simply evaporate.
That is genuinely terrifying. But okay, let's say we wake up the next morning with our data properly saved, assuming we, respected that digital blackout.
Yes, hopefully we did.
Now we move into the start of the active day. This is where physical exertion enters the picture as a highly potent catalyst for brain health.
Meaning it is the exact biological trigger your brain needs to spark new growth.
Right. We are talking specifically about 30 minutes of sustained aerobic exercise, like brisk walking, swimming, or maybe cycling.
Yeah, the research indicates that this kind of consistent movement promotes something called neurogenesis.
Neurogenesis.
Right, and this isn't just maintaining your current brain. Neurogenesis is the actual structural growth of brand new neurons directly inside the hippocampus.
Okay, I really need to push back on this point, though, because it sounds almost too good to be true.
How so?
Well, is a basic 30-minute walk really enough to structurally change the brain and build a resilient intellect? I mean, we are so conditioned to believe that major bodily transformations require like intense, exhausting, high-impact workouts where you are just dripping with sweat.
I know, it totally feels counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the science is definitive here. You do not need to run a marathon or lift incredibly heavy weights to grow new brain cells.
Really? Just a walk?
Yeah, just a brisk walk. Evolutionarily, when our ancestors were walking briskly for sustained periods, they were usually migrating or exploring new, unfamiliar territory.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. So that sustained aerobic movement sends a specific biological signal to the brain, essentially saying, hey, we are moving through a new environment. We need to map our surroundings, build new pathways, and stay sharp to survive.
Wow, so the brain just reacts to the movement.
Exactly. A 30-minute walk provides that exact cardiovascular signal. It floods the hippocampus with nutrient-rich blood and triggers the birth of new neurons without causing massive physical exhaustion.
That is amazing. So we have literally built a larger, more resilient brain before we even sit down at our desks for work.
We really have.
But if you sit down at 9 a.m. and expect this newly upgraded hardware to perform, you have to realize that performance is highly contingent, meaning it heavily depends on the type of fuel you are providing.
Which brings us to our daily nutrition.
Yes, the fuel. The Harvard research isolates two specific dietary components that are necessary for cognitive excellence.
And those are omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in abundance in oily fish or walnuts, and antioxidants, which are packed into dark berries and leafy greens.
And these aren't just empty calories, right? They serve a very specific mechanical purpose.
Let's explain that mechanical purpose, actually, because we so often hear vague advice about eating quote-unquote brain food.
Yeah, it's a buzzword.
But the research describes these nutrients as a protective shield against oxidative stress.
Okay, think of oxidative stress, like rust slowly building up on the tiny, intricate gears of a clock. Every time your brain processes a thought or reads an email or solves a problem, it burns energy.
Right, a metabolic process.
Exactly, and that metabolic process leaves behind a tiny bit of cellular exhaust. If that exhaust just sits there, it starts to rust the gears, slowing down your cognitive processing.
And that's where the nutrition comes in. Omega-3s and antioxidants act as the specialized oil that dissolves that rust.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, they actively seek out and neutralize that cellular exhaust, which are known as free radicals.
Free radicals, right?
By clearing away that microscopic debris, they ensure the neurons can fire rapidly and smoothly. You are actively preventing the wear and tear that leads to that terrible afternoon brain fog.
Okay, so now the brain is rested, it's physically primed, and it's heavily protected from cellular rust. We are ready to work.
Time to shift from hardware to software.
Exactly. How are we aiming our attention? Because the most common mistake people make during the workday is clinging to the absolute myth of multitasking.
Oh, multitasking.
Yeah.
It is universally identified in cognitive research as a detrimental habit that actively damages memory retention.
It's just the worst.
It completely overwhelms the brain's processing capacity and leads directly to what they call cognitive fragmentation.
Cognitive fragmentation. Because your brain doesn't actually do two things at once, does it?
No, it rapidly switches back and forth between tasks. And every time it switches, it burns massive amounts of glucose to remember the context of the new task, leaving your attention completely shattered into tiny, ineffective pieces.
I mean, we all secretly want to believe we are the exception.
Oh, of course.
We want to be the office superhero who can answer emails, listen to a conference call, and review a spreadsheet all at the exact same time.
But it just doesn't work.
It really doesn't. Attempting to multitask is basically like trying to read 3 different books at the very same time.
Oh, well, yeah.
You can hold them all open in front of you, you can scan the words on the pages, but you end up actually understanding and remembering absolutely none of the plot lines.
That's a perfect analogy. You are just skimming the surface and retaining zero depth.
Exactly.
The actionable solution to prevent this fragmentation is adopting the Pomodoro technique.
Which is so helpful.
It really is. This requires dedicating exactly 25 minutes of fierce, undivided attention to a single task. You close the extra browser tabs, you put the phone in another room, and you just focus.
And then you take a break, right?
Yes. This is followed by a brief 5-minute recovery period. 25 minutes is the ideal biological window for intense focus before the brain needs a moment to clear out that metabolic waste we mentioned earlier.
You know, it sounds incredibly simple, yet it is wildly difficult to execute the first few times you try it.
Oh, it's really hard at first. The urge to check your phone is so strong.
But once you lock into that 25-minute block, the clarity is just amazing. Now, let's say during one of those deep focus blocks you are studying. Perhaps you are trying to learn a set of new English vocabulary words.
Which is very relevant for our listeners today.
Highly relevant. How do we ensure that information actually sticks permanently and doesn't just fade away by tomorrow?
Well, this requires a major shift in how we approach learning. The traditional method most of us learned in school is rote memorization. Staring at a list of words and repeating them over and over in one sitting.
I remember doing that.
The research proves this is a highly inefficient strategy. Instead, cognitive scientists advocate for spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
Right. This involves reviewing new information at slowly increasing intervals. So you learn a new word. You review it 1 hour later. Then you wait one entire day to review it again. Then you wait a full week.
Wait. If I am trying to master a new vocabulary word, why on earth would I wait until I am just about to forget it to study it again?
I know, it sounds crazy.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. If I wait a whole week, I feel like the word is going to fade away completely and I will just have to relearn it from scratch.
It definitely feels frustrating, but that friction is actually the entire point of the technique.
Really? The friction is the point.
Yeah. By waiting just long enough for the information to begin to fade, you are forcing the brain to work significantly harder to retrieve that data.
Oh, I see.
That intense effort, that slight struggle where you are staring at the ceiling trying to pull the memory back up, is exactly what thickens the neural pathways.
Wow.
The harder the brain has to work to retrieve a memory, the more permanently it cements that data into your long-term storage. If you just stare at the word every 5 minutes, there is zero struggle, so the brain doesn't bother building a strong pathway.
That completely blows my mind. The struggle itself is the signal that the information is important.
Exactly.
That completely reframes how we should look at the frustration of learning. And it ties beautifully into the broader concept of cultivating lifelong learning to build what researchers call cognitive reserve.
Yes, cognitive reserve is so important.
Because the brain operates on a very strict, unforgiving, quote unquote, use it or lose it principle.
Right. Engaging in novel, challenging tasks like acquiring a second language, which is precisely what our B1 listeners are doing right now, forces the brain to constantly build new connections.
It's actively building the brain.
Yes, this creates a cognitive reserve, which acts as a physical buffer against age-related cognitive decline.
Okay, think of cognitive reserve like building an intricate, massive city grid of roads inside your mind rather than just one single highway.
Really like this.
If you only ever do the exact same tasks every day, you only have one highway. If aging or stress puts a roadblock on that highway, you lose access to your memories.
That makes a lot of sense.
But by constantly learning new things, you build hundreds of side streets and detours. If one road gets blocked later in life, your brain simply takes a detour to access the information it needs.
That is the ultimate way to future-proof your intellect. So our 24-hour cycle is now approaching the evening.
The wind down phase.
We've worked hard, we've focused without multitasking, and we challenged our brains. But we cannot just abruptly crash into bed.
No, definitely not.
We must clear out the accumulated stress of the workday. This is where psychological practices come into play, specifically 5 minutes of mindfulness.
I feel like many people dismiss mindfulness as just a relaxation trend, but stress is actually a massive physical inhibitor of memory.
It really is.
When you are stressed, your body produces high levels of cortisol, and cortisol is basically an alarm system. When that alarm is blaring, your brain physically blocks the hippocampus from storing new memories so it can focus entirely on immediate survival.
Which means you learn nothing. But just 5 minutes of focused, intentional breathing tells the nervous system that the threat has passed.
Just 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes. It actively lowers those cortisol levels, quiets the alarm, and literally expands your working memory capacity. You are clearing the runway so the brain can actually process the day.
Which sets up the perfect transition for our final, crucial evening habit, reflection.
This is a big one.
The research highly recommends spending 10 minutes journaling or reflecting right before you conclude your day.
Doing this acts as a quote-unquote manual, save for your daily experiences.
A manual save, yeah.
You are actively organizing your thoughts and strengthening the neural connections in the hippocampus before the biological sleep cycle even begins to internalize the lessons.
Okay, think of this 10-minute journaling habit like a diligent librarian.
A librarian.
Yeah, so throughout the workday, you have acquired all these new books of information, conversations, and experiences. Right now, they are just piled up randomly on the library desk.
Just a big messy pile.
Exactly. Taking 10 minutes to journal is like the librarian stepping in and neatly organizing those books onto the proper shelves. You are doing the organizational heavy lifting while you are awake, so your brain doesn't have to scramble to sort a messy pile of books in the dark while you sleep.
Oh, that makes so much sense. You are essentially pre-processing the day.
Exactly.
So by the time you close your eyes and the 90-minute save cycle begins, the data is already organized and ready for permanent storage. It is the perfect, holistic final seal on our 24-hour memory optimization cycle.
We cover so much ground in these deep dives, but what does this all truly mean for you listening right now? We so often accept having a bad memory as a fixed personality trait.
We really do.
We treat it like it is our height or our eye color, just something we are stuck with forever.
Right.
But if memory is truly a dynamic capability built through these specific daily choices, if it is a muscle that physically grows in response to sleep, aerobic movement, omega-3s, and the friction of spaced repetition, what could your mind be capable of achieving a single year from now if you simply started treating it like a muscle?
Wow. Seeing how seamlessly all these biological and psychological components work together makes me immensely enthusiastic about trying them out.
Me too.
I am particularly eager to start that 10-minute manual save journaling habit tonight. Getting the librarian to organize the desk before sleep just makes so much logical sense.
It's going to change everything for you.
I think so. But hey, before we wrap up, we made a promise at the start of the show. Is it time to test everyone's comprehension?
It absolutely is. I am so excited to see how much of this new vocabulary and science everyone retained. Well, that is all the time we have for today. We will see you next time on Easy English, Relaxed English Conversations. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.